On my wedding day, my parents were left standing at the back of the room, completely ignored, while my groom's family deliberately took up every single seat. When his mother looked at my parents and smirked, they looked too poor to sit down anyway. My blood boiled. I spoke up to defend the people who raised me. But before I could finish my sentence, my husband spun around and slapped me across the face in front of the entire congregation. The room fell dead silent, and then his family began to laugh. They thought they had humiliated me. They thought I was a helpless nobody who would just cry and take the abuse. But as I stood there, holding my burning cheek in my white bridal gown, I didn't shed a single tear. Instead, I calmly walked out of the chapel, pulled out my phone, and made one single call. You see, my husband and his arrogant family had made a fatal mistake. They had absolutely no idea who my older brother really was, or the kind of absolute power he held over their entire lives. My name is Chloe. I'm 25 years old, and the day that was supposed to be the happiest of my life quickly transformed into an unforgettable nightmare. Standing at the entrance of the grand chapel, my heart shattered into a million pieces. There, right at the back of the room, were my humble, hardworking parents. They were left standing awkwardly against the cold stone wall, completely ignored and brushed aside. Meanwhile, Julian's elitist family had arrived early and deliberately occupied every single seat in the front rows, leaving absolutely no room for the people who raised me. When Julian's mother, Eleanor, noticed my parents looking for a place to sit, she didn't offer a single chair. Instead, she leaned over to her sister, looked directly at my mother's modest dress, and smirked loudly enough for the entire room to hear. They look far too poor to sit down anyway. My blood instantly boiled. The sheer cruelty of her words pierced right through me. Unable to stay silent while they humiliated my family, I stepped forward, gripped my bridal bouquet tight, and spoke up to defend them. "Eleanor, you will show my parents some respect," I demanded, my voice shaking with rage. But before I could even finish my sentence, Julian spun around. His face was twisted with fury. Without a single word of warning, he raised his hand and slapped me across the face, right in front of the entire congregation. The heavy blow echoed through the chapel, and the room fell dead silent. I stood there in my white bridal gown, my cheek burning with an intense heat, utterly stunned. Then, breaking the silence, Julian's family began to chuckle and whisper. They thought they had successfully broken me. They thought I was just a helpless, weak nobody who would cry, bow her head, and accept the abuse. But they didn't know that their countdown to total ruin had just begun. To fully understand how Julian and his family had the absolute audacity to do something so monstrous on our wedding day, you have to understand the dynamic of our entire relationship. Julian and I had been dating for 2 years, and from the very first moment I was introduced to his mother, Eleanor, I was treated like an unwelcome outsider. They belonged to the elite social circles of the city, owning a prominent regional construction and real estate firm that had been in their family for generations. Because of this, they walked around with their noses in the air, constantly flaunting their wealth, designer clothes, and luxury vehicles as if it made them superior human beings. I, on the other hand, always preferred to live quietly and modestly. I drove a reliable, ordinary car, dressed in simple clothes, and deeply valued humility over flashy displays of materialism. Because I never bragged about my family or flashed expensive jewelry, Julian and Eleanor made a massive, arrogant assumption. They completely convinced themselves that I came from absolute poverty. They looked down on my hardworking parents as lower-class citizens who were beneath their social standing. For a long time, I tolerated their passive-aggressive remarks and snobbish attitudes purely out of my love for Julian. I genuinely believed he was different from his mother, and I kept convincing myself that once we were married, the toxic family drama would finally settle down. What I didn't realize back then was that Julian's love was completely conditional, and his family's immense pride was actually masking a deep, desperate financial vulnerability. They were hiding ugly secrets behind their expensive suits, completely unaware that their elitist blind spot was about to lead them straight into a trap of their own making. Stepping out of that chapel, the burning sting on my cheek was nothing compared to the ice-cold focus settling over me. I walked straight into the private bridal suite, locked the heavy wooden door behind me, and reached for my phone. It was time to call my older brother, Ethan. To Julian and his arrogant family, Ethan was just a quiet, low-profile businessman who traveled constantly for work, which is why he hadn't arrived at the ceremony yet. They assumed he was just another ordinary worker from a simple background, but they had absolutely no idea who my brother really was. In reality, Ethan was the founder, CEO, and majority shareholder of Vanguard Capital, the massive venture capital conglomerate that secretly funded the largest developments in the state. Just 8 months ago, Julian's family construction firm had fallen into deep financial trouble, teetering on the edge of total collapse. Desperate to save their lifestyle, they had begged Vanguard Capital for a massive multi-million-dollar bailout loan. Ethan had approved the funding, completely unaware that the reckless company belonged to my fiancé's family, as we always kept our business and personal lives entirely separate. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed his number. The moment Ethan answered, I told him every single thing that had just happened: the disrespect toward our parents, Eleanor's cruel insults, and the physical blow Julian had delivered to my face. On the other end of the line, the silence was absolutely terrifying. I could hear his breath hitch as his protective older brother instincts instantly clashed with his calculated business mind. Before we continue to the absolute chaos that followed, I want to know who is watching this right now. Please comment the city you are watching from so I can see exactly how far my story has reached. Ethan's voice finally returned, lower and darker than I had ever heard it before. "Chloe, do not shed a single tear for those monsters," he whispered with a deadly quiet authority. "They wanted to destroy our family today, but they just handed me the keys to destroy their entire empire. Listen to me very carefully and do exactly what I say next." Ethan's instructions were precise, cold, and brilliant. He told me to wipe my face, apply fresh makeup over the swelling mark on my cheek, and walk back out to the reception hall with my head held high. He explicitly ordered me to act completely compliant and submissive for just 1 more hour, letting Julian and his mother believe they had successfully asserted their dominance over me. "Do not call off the wedding publicly yet, Chloe," Ethan murmured grimly. "Let them celebrate. Let them think they have won. The higher their pride swells right now, the harder they are going to crash when I arrive." While I forced myself to smile through the sheer disgust and walked toward the grand reception pavilion, Ethan unleashed an absolute financial earthquake behind the scenes. From the backseat of his black sedan, he dialed his executive legal team and corporate auditors, putting into motion a devastating sequence of events that Julian's family never could have anticipated. You see, Julian and Eleanor had a hidden motive for rushing this marriage. They had recently discovered that my humble parents owned a vast tract of rural land inherited from my grandfather. Because the land looked undeveloped, they assumed it was practically worthless and had quietly drafted paperwork for me to sign immediately after the wedding, planning to legally seize it and sell it off to cover their massive corporate debts. What their elitist blind spot prevented them from realizing was that the land was positioned directly over a newly mapped commercial transit corridor, making it worth tens of millions of dollars. They thought they were marrying a penniless girl they could easily manipulate, entirely blind to the fact that Vanguard Capital already held the ultimate debt leverage over their lives. I stepped into the grand reception hall, a flawless mask of compliance painted carefully over my face. Seeing me walk in quietly, Julian and Eleanor exchanged a smug, victorious look across the room. They truly believed the slap had worked, assuming I was now completely broken and submissive to their absolute authority. Julian walked over, casually wrapping a heavy arm around my waist as if nothing had happened, while Eleanor raised her wine glass to me with a mocking, triumphant smile. I swallowed my absolute disgust and played along, forcing a gentle smile while counting down the minutes until their world shattered. The expensive champagne flowed freely, and the atmosphere was thick with the suffocating arrogance of Julian's elite social circle. Soon, it was time for the traditional wedding toasts. Julian stepped confidently up to the microphone at the center of the stage, tapping the glass to command the room's attention. He looked incredibly proud of himself as he began to deliver an incredibly boastful speech. He openly bragged about his family's high social standing, their unmatched dominance in the regional market, and an impending multi-million-dollar business expansion that would secure their empire for decades to come. He was openly celebrating his perceived victory, completely oblivious to the trap closing around him. Right at the absolute peak of his arrogant proclamation, just as he raised his glass to toast his family's brilliant future, a sudden heavy commotion echoed from the back of the venue. The grand double doors of the hall were abruptly swung open, cutting Julian off mid-sentence. Every single head in the room turned in unison as my older brother, Ethan, marched into the room, flanked by 4 stone-faced corporate lawyers and senior financial auditors. The entire room held its breath as Ethan marched straight down the center aisle, his eyes locked onto Julian with a terrifying intensity. Julian blinked in confusion, lowering the microphone slightly. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, his voice cracking slightly under the sudden weight of Ethan's presence. "This is a private family event. Someone get this guy out of here." Ethan didn't hesitate. He stepped right up onto the stage, took the microphone directly out of Julian's hand, and faced the stunned crowd. "My name is Ethan Vanguard," he announced, his voice booming through the speakers. "I am the founder and CEO of Vanguard Capital." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Eleanor dropped her wine glass, the expensive crystal shattering loudly against the hardwood floor. Her face drained of all color as she realized the quiet, ordinary brother they had dismissed was actually the absolute ruler of their financial destiny. 8 months ago, your firm begged my company for a massive multi-million-dollar bailout to prevent total bankruptcy, Ethan continued, looking directly at the trembling groom. That contract included a strict morality and breach of conduct clause. 10 minutes ago, after witnessing your physical assault against my sister, my legal team officially terminated that agreement. Ethan pulled a set of official legal documents from his lawyer's briefcase and slapped them hard against Julian's chest. Effective immediately, Vanguard Capital is calling in the entire debt. Your assets are frozen, and foreclosure protocols on your family estate begin tomorrow morning. Julian stared at the paperwork, his hands shaking violently as his entire empire vanished in a single minute. I calmly stepped forward, pulled the platinum wedding band off my finger, and dropped it right into his glass of champagne. "We are done," I said clearly. I turned my back on his ruined family, took my parents by their hands, and walked out of the hall without looking back. 3 months later, the dust has finally settled, and justice has been served completely. Julian's family construction firm plummeted into total bankruptcy within weeks, forcing them to sell off their luxury cars and their beloved estate just to pay a fraction of what they owed. But the financial ruin was only the beginning for them. Using the extensive corporate records my brother Ethan unearthed during the foreclosure, our legal team discovered a massive paper trail of systematic corporate fraud and embezzlement that Julian and Eleanor had committed over the years. Julian is currently facing serious criminal charges, trading his expensive designer wedding suits for a standard prison jumpsuit. Meanwhile, My family used the incredible wealth generated from our inherited transit corridor land to build a beautiful, state-of-the-art community center dedicated entirely to helping and supporting local victims of domestic and financial abuse. I am finally living in absolute peace, surrounded by the people who truly love and respect me. Now, I'm incredibly curious about all of you who listened to my story today. What would you have done if you were standing in my shoes at that altar? Would you have stayed calm or handled it differently? Please comment your thoughts below. Thank you so much for watching until the very end, and be sure to click on one of the 2 videos on your screen right now for more unbelievable stories that will absolutely shock you.